Welcome to this presentation on fake news. I'm Gaetan Hammond, teacher librarian at Dr. Martin Leboldes Catholic High School.
And I'm Sophie Long, a grade 5-6 teacher at Sacred Heart Community School. Gaetan and I are speaking to you today on behalf of the Saskatchewan School Library Association. Fake news has been responsible for some very dramatic moments over the last few years. So today, we're going to look at some of the precursors of fake news, the modern definition of fake news, why fake news is so effective at fooling people, and what we can do as educators to train ourselves and our students to identify and reject fake news.
Using false information to mislead others is not a new phenomenon. One early example of news being used to mislead the general population is the great ancient love story between Mark Antony and Cleopatra. For those not familiar with this story, Antony was a powerful Roman general who had ambitions to become the leader of Rome. Antony believed that a series of successful military campaigns would show the people of Rome his obvious martial qualities, and he decided to use Egypt as a launching point for his military campaigns. It was here that he met Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, and became both politically and romantically involved with her. Antony's rival, Octavian, would use this relationship as a catalyst to discredit Antony to other Roman noblemen. In a series of short, Twitter-worthy phrases printed on the currency of the day, Octavian made Antony out to be a drunken idiot who was financially incompetent and would place the interests of Egypt above the interests of Rome. Octavian implied that Antony was compromised by his relationship with Cleopatra and would favor Egypt over Rome, just as he favored Cleopatra over his Roman wife, who happened to be Octavian's sister. This propaganda operation proved to be an effective, if brutal, strategy, as Octavian, after a civil war with Antony, would go on to become Emperor Caesar Augustus, while Antony was driven to suicide. Later, the invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg would make it even easier to spread misleading information around. It turned out that people liked to read fantastic stories. In fact, the more outrageous, the better. The tabloid industry, as we know it, is based around this principle. One well-known large-scale incident of a false story being taken seriously is the Great Moon Hoax of 1835. In that year, the New York Sun published a series of articles claiming life had been discovered on the moon. These articles were accompanied by illustrations of fantastical creatures, such as unicorns and a bat-like humanoid species. These articles replicated the journalistic style of the day so convincingly that even a team of scientists from Yale University was taken in. While the Sun intended for the articles to be satirical in nature, many readers were completely fooled. It would be almost a month before the Sun admitted that the entire story was a hoax. Despite the number of people fooled by the articles, most readers thought in retrospect that it was a great joke, and sales of the Sun significantly increased. Another famous example of a fictional publication being seen as true news is the 1938 CBS radio play broadcast of War of the Worlds. Based on the H.G. Wells book of the same name, wherein Earth is invaded by Martians, the actors revamped the story to be set in America and delivered it as a series of news broadcasts. Radio broadcasts were the primary form of news gathering at that time in America. Here is a brief excerpt from War of the Worlds to give you a sense of what this sounded like.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote.
This broadcast was produced by Orson Welles, and many listeners who failed to catch the disclaimer at the beginning of the play were convinced that the broadcasts were real, and panicked mobs formed across America. This episode was a foreshadowing of how a familiar media format could be used to convince people that false news was true. Stories such as these remind us that while the news presented may be false, misleading, or fictitious, the consequences in the real world can be quite serious.
Fake news in its modern context, however, only begins to explode after the advent of the internet and social media. Several factors make this possible. First, in the current environment, anyone can be a publisher, and anyone's published work can go viral quickly, so it is relatively easy for a manipulator's fake story to have the same reach as mainstream news stories. It is now rarely formal publications, such as newspapers or television broadcasters, that are creating the fake news in an obviously exaggerated way. Most fake news is being distributed on social media today for two reasons. One motivation for creating fake news is that people with technological skills can make quite a lot of money from automated advertising bots, such as Google AdSense. For example, in 2018, BuzzFeed News completed an investigative report on the spread of fake news during the 2016 presidential elections in America. Their reporting revealed that vast amounts of fake news sources were originating out of the small Macedonian town of Veles. Young people in their late teens and early 20s had created fake political websites and pages on Facebook and other social media. They filled these with fake sensational headlines and articles to direct traffic to their sites, which gained money from ad revenues the more often people visited the sites. These young people were making a lot of money in a situation where economic opportunities were scarce. When asked, one of these teenagers pointed out, "The Americans loved our stories, and we make money from them. Who cares if they are true or false?" In this video by NBC News, we see one of the fake news creators explain how the industry works and why it is profitable.
He asked that we keep his identity hidden. So let's call him Dmitry, just a guy making a living in the small town of Veles, Macedonia.
I wrote that the celebrity wants to kill Trump. The Queen of England wants to meet Trump. Trump and Putin had a secret meeting in Mexico.
Dmitry is 18 years old, and he says that in the past 6 months, he's made more than $60,000 writing, posting, and sharing fake news articles about the American election. His biggest cash cow?
Make America great again.
Donald Trump.
Trump is not a politician just like any other. I think that nothing could beat Trump supporters when it comes to, social media engagement, and that's why we stick to Trump.
In the final 3 months of the presidential campaign, the most viral fake news stories outperformed the most viral real news stories on Facebook, according to a BuzzFeed analysis. Most were pro-Trump. And some 150 fake U.S. politics sites have been traced here, to Dmitry's Macedonian hometown. He was willing to lift the veil on his bootstrap operation, which he claims garnered 40 million page views in the past 6 months. To draw readers, his fake stories copy the style of more mainstream organizations, including NBC News.
The Republicans love the veterans. They love the veterans. They respect them, I think, the most of anyone. And what you do is you say Obama donated $300 million to Hillary Clinton's campaign that he took from the veterans. And people will open that immediately, saying why.
For headlines, he builds on a format that might also be familiar to consumers of traditional news.
The most read news articles are usually the one containing the clickbait words. And the clickbait words are, as you know, the "oh my god, breaking news, wow." If you say, "oh my god, new bunch of emails from Hillary got released," people will like to open that because they want to see more.
Really, Dmitry says, the fake news game is pretty straightforward.
You see what people like, and you just give them. If they like water, you give water. If they like wine, you give wine. It's really simple what we do.
Fake news has affected Veles. In a country with almost a quarter of its citizens unemployed, and in a town with an average annual income below $5,000, the impulse to deceive was seemingly irresistible. So now, as the money flows, so too does the liquor. This club is cashing in on the success of fake news entrepreneurs, who get paid relatively majestic sums by Macedonian standards by selling advertising on their sites.
What happened in our town is that a lot of money came, and a lot of people quit their jobs so they can put a lot of effort in this, as they saw this as the big idea, as their big chance, the big change in their life.
One venue here even plans to host a club night on the day Google pays out its ad revenue. In response to concerns that fake news may have influenced the election, Google and Facebook recently announced new measures to crack down on sites like Dimitri's. But his Google AdSense account is still up. Besides, Dimitri says, fake news didn't alter the election. And if anyone needs to take responsibility, it's surely not him.
I know who is the responsible one for the election, and that's the American people. I think the American people take their politics not as serious as other countries do. No offense to Americans, but we don't believe such hoax news.
The second primary reason for creating fake news is to spread a particular ideology. Recently, we've seen the rise of the QAnon movement, which is promoting fake news stories for more ideological reasons. A second factor in the rise of fake news is the change in the type of fake news being generated. In the past, fake news was all content-driven. Now it is possible to not only create fake content, but to manipulate actual news sources. For instance, in Pakistan, a public service announcement was created on video to ask people to be vigilant of child abductions. This video was modified to look like a child kidnapping and went viral in India, resulting in the death of innocent people who were suspected of the false kidnapping. Notice the difference in these two videos, the public service announcement followed by the modified video. The modified version of this video was posted on WhatsApp in India, resulting in the death of 20 people, lynched for being accused of kidnapping. This ability to directly alter the medium itself makes it much more difficult for people to determine what is real from what is false. More recently, deepfake software allows content creators to create increasingly realistic-looking videos that appear to use well-known celebrity actors and politicians saying whatever the content creator wishes. These softwares are becoming increasingly available and easy to use. Alterations of photo, audio, and video files, which would have required expensive equipment and extensive technical knowledge in the past, are now being made available cheaply and easily through easy-to-obtain software and online tutorials.
It got me thinking about my full-time employees and their ability to survive on $8 an hour in New York City. And foremost in all of our minds has been the loss and the grief felt by the people of Orlando. Most of us don't get our health care through the marketplace. We get it through our job or through Medicare or Medicare. And what you should know is that thanks to the Affordable Care Act, your coverage is better today than it was before. Women can get free checkups, and you can't get charged more just for being a woman. To give his employees came together to pass a common. There's a bill that would boost America's very, very hard times.
Some progress, at least within the small confines of the legal community, I think it's real important.
Here we go. President Barack Obama, when you giving a speech, make sure you use a lot of pauses.
America's businesses have created 14.5 million new jobs over 75 straight months.
We're developing technology. Every technology can be used in some negative way, and so we all should work towards making sure that it's not going to happen. And even one of the interesting directions is that once you know how to create something, you know how to reverse engineer it. And so you can, and so one could create methods for identifying edited videos versus real videos.
The other factor that has led to the rise of fake news in the last 10 years is the social media platforms themselves. Platforms like Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, and Parler, to name a few, are not typically very discerning when it comes to the quality, reliability, or ideology of the original source. Furthermore, these stories are commonly passed along via friends or followers with a tacit endorsement through a like or a share. This makes people more likely to believe stories that are fake news. And finally, social media tends to elevate stories that are tagged as popular through a number of shares and likes, a situation which is complicated by the presence of online bots, AI presences programmed to inflate popularity statistics. When a story appears to be popular, it encourages more people to click on it, whether fake or true. As a result, fake news can spread more rapidly, more credibly, and more profitably than ever before.
With the growing number of people aware of the problem of fake news, why is fake news so effective today? And why are so many people taken in by fake news? How can information that is false continue to spread so easily? To begin to answer these questions, let's take a look at what fake news is and the different types of fake news. At its most basic, fake news is fabricated material that is meant to be perceived as factual. However, within this basic definition, there are categories of fake news that can help specify the intent of the false information. To begin, it is important to understand the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Misinformation is false information that is inadvertently created, such as a typo stating that an event happened on September the 4th when it was actually September the 14th. These types of errors, while they can occasionally result in serious miscommunications, do not have the intent to cause harm or misdirection. Disinformation, on the other hand, is false information that is deliberately created with the intent to mislead, whereas malinformation is a more serious version of false information that is deliberately created with the intent to cause harm to a person or group. With these three concepts in mind, we can look at different types of fake news to determine its purpose and intent. One form of news that begins to blur the lines between fake news and real news is news satire. Satirical news uses factual information but presents it in a humorous or exaggerated way to entertain. Often the creator of the satire wishes to make a point. These sources of fake news are designed to replicate the look and feel of authentic news sources, such as newspaper articles or televised broadcasts. Content creators who delve into satire are typically clear that the intent of the work is humorous or satirical, and do not claim to be journalists. One well-known example of news satire is The Daily Show, which bases its comedy on current events. An example of news satire can be seen in this excerpt from The Daily Show.
Normally, we would catch up on all of the headlines from around the world. You know, maybe we'd talk about Harvey Weinstein getting 23 years in prison. Or we could talk about the Supreme Court giving President Trump a victory on immigration. But today, there's only one story the entire world is talking about: the coronavirus, aka COVID-19, aka mumbo number death. It's now in 110 countries, with over 122,000 confirmed cases, and it looks like it's only getting worse.
The World Health Organization today officially designating coronavirus as a global pandemic.
Congress's in-house doctor told Capitol Hill staffers at a closed-door meeting this week that he expects 75 to 150 million people in the United States to contract the coronavirus.
New tests led by the U.S. government scientists show the virus can live in the air for several hours and on some surfaces for up to 3 days.
Oh, okay, that's a lot of information, so let's try and break it all down. First, the World Health Organization has officially just declared coronavirus a global pandemic, which, yes, is scary for us humans, but from Corona's perspective, it's pretty cool. Yeah? No, because for a virus, this is like going platinum, you know? It's a big day. Started from the Wuhan, now we're here. I think it's pretty cool for Corona. And yes, I'm saying that because I hope if I suck up to Corona, it'll leave me alone. I'm not sure if it'll work, but I'm going to try it. Now, the second piece of information is a little more disconcerting. Congress's in-house doctor says up to 150 million people in the United States could end up getting corona. Yeah, that is half the country. And then the other half won't get it because they're clearly losers who don't have friends. Yeah, it's gonna be like, how do you not have corona? Has nobody touched you? I'd rather be dad.
Similar to news satire is news parody. Parody also tries to mimic the feel of authentic news mediums, but it differs from satire in that parody uses non-factual information as the basis of its stories. While these stories are occasionally mistaken for actual news events, the creators of news parody typically try to make clear that the stories are false and not meant to be taken seriously. The outrageous stories of news parody are meant to provide humor and to entertain. And so again, we have a situation that blurs the line between fake news and real news. Parody is clearly not real news. Yet it is not attempting to intentionally deceive the reader. Rather, any close examination will reveal the entertainment purpose of the parody. Well-known examples of news parody are the websites The Onion and the Canadian version, The Beaverton. This excerpt from the CBC radio broadcast This Is That is a good example of a news parody.
The debate over language is not a new concept to the people of Montreal. However, this week, residents of the smoked meat city were introduced to a new discussion that focuses on our canine friends. According to some city councillors, if dogs are to be utilizing public spaces, they should be trained in both official languages, meaning they would have to understand commands in both French and in English. One such councillor that is hoping to pass this bylaw requiring dogs in Montreal dog parks to be bilingual is Benoit Ledouce. Hello, Mr. Ledouce.
Hello, Pat.
How are you, sir?
Well, you know, to be honest, I think I'll be doing better once we've sorted through this mess of an issue.
Okay, well, I want to talk a little bit more about this. So why is it that you want to change the rules in Montreal dog parks so that dogs would have to understand both English and French commands?
Well, Pat, the current situation in Montreal dog parks is untenable chaos. Half the dog are getting their command in French, the other are getting their command in English, and the various dog commands are incomprehensible to each other. To illustrate the point with the experience of my own, about 2 weeks ago, I was in the park with my own dog and a large Anglo dog. He leaped up onto my shoulder and began to lick and kiss. So I looked him in the eye and I said, va-t'en, bonhomme, away. Which means roughly translated, hey, go out of this place, fun guy, go. And the dog looked back at me, total incomprehension. I mean, our alienation from each other was absolute.
So you really think that dogs not understanding both official languages is an issue?
Well, I think you have to weigh it against the alternative, Pat, which is that we're going to, turn each of the city's dog parks into a renewal of the Plains of Abraham every Saturday morning. We're not saying you're going to go and turn the dog into a super dog to go on the the David Letterson show and do this stupid trick program. We're saying basic stuff, 80 or 90 command that they would speak in both French and in English.
Although the story is completely false, there was obviously no such legislation. The story was convincing enough that Public Radio International picked up the story and broadcast it as real news. Fortunately, no harm was done, and Canadian dogs continue to go about their happy monolinguistic lives. News fabrication is where we see true fake news. In a news fabrication, the content creator attempts to make the content mimic a true news source, whether it be a website, article, video, or audio broadcast. But the content also has no basis in fact. A parody author has an understanding with the audience that the material being presented is clearly false. But in fabricated news, the intent is to deceive the audience into believing that the false news is true. A common example of this type of fabricated news is a clickbait headline, as seen in the NBC video we saw earlier. These headlines are extremely easy to make. I'm using just a quickly searched phrase generator to show you how easy it is to make a clickbait headline. And of course, any of these words could be replaced with words of your own to make it personalized to what you are trying to create. These headlines are designed solely to get people to click on them and redirect them to a Facebook page or web page, thereby driving up ad revenue on that page. The most effective of these builds on well-known memes or partially true statements woven into a false narrative that spins a particular bias, such as the memes found on this easy-to-make meme generator. These partialities help provide legitimacy to fool the reader. If a partisan news source happens to pick up the story and share it, the story gains even more legitimacy. Furthermore, there's a snowball effect that occurs with liking and sharing posts. The more a post is shared or liked, the more it is seen as legitimate, which results in more liking and sharing. Studies have found that when people like or share posts, their friends, followers, and family are very likely to take the information at face value without reading the article and pass it along to their friends, followers, and family.
Photo manipulation is another type of fake news and falls into two categories. First, there are photos and videos that are intentionally altered to make the viewer believe an alternate version of events. One famous example of this involves Parkland shooting survivor Emma Gonzalez. In a photo shoot for Teen Vogue, Emma was photographed tearing apart a shooting range target. This photograph was altered to show Emma tearing apart the United States Constitution, implying that she was attacking the Second Amendment involving the right to bear arms in that country.
The second type of photo manipulation is when a photo is taken out of context, as in this example involving Justin Trudeau. In 2016, an article ran in several newspapers. It was picked up by Facebook and Twitter and shared thousands of times, claiming that Justin Trudeau had converted to Islam. It was based largely on this photograph. Here you can see Trudeau dressed in what appears to be a traditional Arab head garb. If we scroll down a little bit on this page, we can see a bit more of a close-up of this. And if you look in the bottom corner, bottom right-hand corner, you'll see a bit of what is the original photo. And what's happened here is that the original photo is on the left, and we see Trudeau out trick-or-treating with his young son, who is dressed as the Little Prince from the famous novel. Trudeau is dressed as the pilot who finds the Little Prince in the desert. The photo was flipped to make it difficult to track on reverse imaging software, cropped and zoomed in so that we only saw Trudeau's head. This is a very good example of a false news story used by photo manipulation. So what is it about social media that makes people so susceptible to accepting and passing along fake news? We have already looked at the tendency of social media to use likes and shares to amplify posts, with little discrimination about the validity of the content. Another factor that is being studied is the tendency of social media users to create filter bubbles. In his 2011 TED Talk, Beware Online Filter Bubbles, Eli Pariser noted the tendency of social media platforms to use algorithms to determine what their users wanted to see and hear,
which would lead to a situation where social media users were only being confronted with information that reinforced their own worldviews, a situation which he coined a filter bubble. Pariser argued that these filter bubbles would ultimately be troublesome for democracy, as people would become isolated from perspectives that challenged them to see the world from other viewpoints. Generally speaking, people have a tendency to trust others who are similar to them, whether the similarity be in ethnicity, politics, religion, or other factors. There is an implicit bias to trusting groups to which we see ourselves belonging. This is amplified by a desire for comfort and certainty. People dislike being challenged and will gravitate to ideas that reinforce their implicit biases. Therefore, they are more likely to believe news sources that seem to come from a trusted group and which reinforce that which they already believe, without checking the validity of the content. If the story has a thread of reasonableness to it, however tenuous, many people will cling to the idea in order to confirm their own biases. For instance, a left-handed person may read an article claiming left-handed people are more intelligent than right-handed people, and be inclined to believe the premise without confirming the source, as it confirms what they believe to be true. Likewise, an article that claimed right-handed people were more intelligent may be dismissed by the same person, even if it had verifiable facts, because it did not confirm the initial bias. Another factor that leads people to accepting fake news is a tendency to accept intuition over facts. A 2017 study from Ohio State University and the University of Michigan showed that people who agreed with the statement, "I trust my gut to tell me what's true and what's not," were more susceptible to believing fake news. Again, this situation is compounded by an overall eroding of society's trust in experts and professional journalism. While there are many reasons for this erosion, one prominent reason is the tendency for people to proclaim as fake news every piece of information which does not fit into their filter bubble. There is also a modern tendency to give opinion the same weight as fact. If every internet blogger's opinion is given the same recognition as trained scientists or professional journalists, it can become difficult for those trained scientists and journalists to make their research heard over the noise. So how can we, as teachers, help our students navigate the world of fake news in the post-truth society of today? Unfortunately, there is no quick tool for determining fake news. In today's environment, a person needs to be cautious and put some time into developing strategies to employ when encountering new media and building up a collection of trustworthy sources. One website that offers some useful lessons on information literacy is Newseum ED. The collections section of their website offers some ready-made lessons on media literacy and fact-finding. Another great source, which is Canadian, is Media Smarts, and their Break the Fake program. Both sites contain very practical teaching resources for a variety of age groups. One of the tools employed by Newseum ED is the acronym ESCAPE, which stands for the following: evidence, source, context, audience, purpose, and execution. By examining each of these areas, one can begin to determine whether a news source is trustworthy or not. So here's an article from Rebel News, Manitoba's secret COVID-19 camp, What's Going On Here? I'm going to use this article to apply the ESCAPE acronym and see what's going on.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Cian Bexty for Rebel News, standing in rural Manitoba, standing in a place at a location you probably wouldn't even notice if you weren't looking for it. This is a COVID camp, one of the ones that the CBC doesn't want you to believe exists. In fact, article after article coming out of the CBC and every other mainstream media site, but particularly the CBC, who is running damage control for Justin Trudeau, they say that no sites like this, no, they're not real, they don't exist. Justin Trudeau, of course, put out an RFI, a request for information, asking for industry to give them input, give the federal government input onto how they could best run camps just like these. And apparently they've set up a few already. Now, this camp in particular is run by the Manitoba Métis Federation. and it is currently standing empty, according to a conversation I had with two folks who are running maintenance here. Now, they weren't wearing any masks when I was talking to them, so I tend to believe them that there's no COVID cases in here right now, but I'm also curious as to what the purpose of these camps are, especially when it comes to Justin Trudeau's camps. The RFI states that it's for health purposes and for dealing with the coronavirus pandemic, but it also says that people can be added to the roster of these camps' clientele for any other requirement that the federal government has. What are those requirements, and why is the CBC so concerned with you knowing that camps like this already exist? Now, this camp in particular has raised some concerns with the local community. Portage, Manitoba, just a few kilometers north of here, well, their newspaper put out this article. They were concerned about the ominous barbed wire that is around this facility. It's pretty ominous. Now, Justin Trudeau is furious about articles like that and stories like you're listening to right now. He doesn't want you to know what's going on. He doesn't want you to think at all. Listen to what he said.
I was chatting with a group of students the other day, and a young woman asked me about COVID internment camps, and I had to explain that as we consume increasing amounts and various sources of information online and around us, we need to continue to be attentive to source. We need to continue to be attentive to comparing various reports and looking for trusted sources.
Now, in the article, the spokesperson for this site says that people would be referred by the provincial government and then sent here. It doesn't say anything about volunteering. It just says that if the government refers them, they will accept them. Now, this could put them as a pretty prime location, a candidate for Justin Trudeau's planned quarantine sites. He wants to expand them. In fact, he wants them to exist for 2 years, up to 2 years. So right now, here, south of Portage-La Prairie, at this isolated site, Justin Trudeau might send some federal agents to check it out soon. And maybe Justin Trudeau will end up adding this very camp to his roster of COVID camps where they send Canadians who meet certain government requirements, just like the RFI said. Now, if that's not ominous, I don't know what is. For Rebel News, south of Portage-La Prairie, at this COVID camp that the mainstream media doesn't want you to even know exists, I'm Cian Bexty. Hey, thanks for tuning into our coverage here at Rebel News. Be sure to like and subscribe to our content. And if you've already done that, consider ringing the notification bell. If you do that, you'll be able to stay up to date with the news as it happens.
So after watching that video, wow, those are some pretty strong accusations. A major CBC cover-up, the Prime Minister is furious. Let's see what's going on here. So, let's take a look at the evidence. First of all, does such a camp actually exist? Is there a COVID-19 camp in Manitoba built by the Métis Federation? Well, here's an article from Portage Online, which is Portage-La Prairie's online website, and we can see that, yes, the MFF does have a COVID camp ready for use. Same kind of pictures that we saw. There's the fence. There's the trailers. So having determined that there is in fact a COVID camp there, let's take a look at the source. Who made this article? Can I trust them? When I personally want to check out the bias of a newspaper or whether they are factually accurate, I use MediaBiasFactChecked.com. So here I have looked up Rebel News, and I can see that they are a extreme right, very far along the spectrum of right-biased web sources. And I can see that their factual reporting is getting a review of mixed, not very promising for Rebel News. Overall, we rate the Rebel right-biased based on story selection that always favors the right, and mixed for factual reporting due to poor sourcing techniques and consistent one-sided reporting. Well, I certainly got the one-sided reporting listening to the video on the constant bashing of CBC, always referring to the Prime Minister in a negative light. So, yes, I'm definitely seeing some of that as I watch that video. So what I want to find next is some context. What is actually going on in this story? Here's that CBC article that was referenced in the Rebel News video. Here it says, disinformation campaign falsely suggests Canadians will be forcibly sent to quarantine sites. So I think that's really what's at issue here. What is the purpose of these COVID camps? what is actually going on with these facilities. Now, just to be fair, I should not just take CBC's word for it that they are an honest institution. I'm going to use Media Bias Fact Check to look at their story as well. So, they are being rated as left of center, but not nearly so far along the biased path as Rebel News, which was at the far, far end of the right extreme spectrum, and their factual reporting is being rated as quite high. So, that's more promising. We'll take a look at what's going on with the story now. So what is the purpose of these camps? Are people being forcibly sent there? Well, I've gone back to the Portage Online site, and we're going to just scroll down a little bit here, and here's a paragraph that looks like it might be promising. The procedure to get into these camps is that you need to be referred by one of the health authorities within Manitoba. We would bring citizens in and put them in this camp, in Tram specifically. Apparently there's a smaller camp in Winnipegosis. It's just that they need to be referred. We're hoping that the referral process happens because we've made it known. Okay, so being referred is not the same as being forcibly sent, so what's the deal with COVID camps in Canada? Well, fortunately, this BC local news article also talks about what the government is trying to do here. This one is a nice one because it actually references the Rebel News story that we are talking about here. And so we're going to see what they have to say here. And so here in this part of the BC local news article, we can see a little bit more information that might give us some context into this story. All travelers coming into Canada are encouraged to quarantine for 14 days, and generally choose to quarantine in their own homes, but for some that's not an option. They are then encouraged to look for an alternative, either hotels or motels or staying with friends, whatever is within their means. If travelers to Canada are confirmed to have no other suitable options available, they may be transferred to a designated Government of Canada quarantine facility. This measure is used as a last resort. So the purpose of these camps is to provide people who are traveling to Canada, or returning to Canada rather, who have perhaps had a COVID-19 positive test and have no place else to quarantine, to be provided with a place to go, once they are referred to by a medical health authority. And so that is how I would use this ESCAPE acronym to evaluate a web source. I've looked at some evidence, I've looked at the source, I provided some context. I could go further, but I think I have a pretty good sense that this article, while it does have some partial truths, is perhaps not being fully factual and is certainly being extremely biased. Therefore, I would tend to steer clear of an article of this nature. But the key thing to note in this demonstration is that when we took a look at the website, we had to open up a lot of tabs along the top to get to the information that we wanted to get to. And in fact, we could have looked at other things as well. But it is not enough to simply look at a website and try to determine whether that website is factually accurate or not. In this day and age, further digging is required, and it typically involves doing several searches looking for detailed information on what the article is, particularly when you're trying to provide yourself with context. And I hope that demonstration is a good sense of what is involved when dealing with fake news to try to determine what is true from what is false.
Although it seems like a new concept, fake news has existed for almost as long as modern civilization. However, social media platforms and the internet have increased our access to information. People are inundated with news and other information the second they unlock their devices. It is our responsibility to teach young people how to evaluate the information that they receive. It starts by being aware of your own filter bubble and purposefully looking beyond it. Similarly, liking and sharing on social media is easy to do, but we have a responsibility to read and verify the information we are sharing. According to a study from Columbia University, 6 out of 10 social media users will share an article after only reading the headline. You can use the ESCAPE evaluation tool to assess the information that you come across. But most importantly, we need to have conversations with young people about the dangers of fake news. If you're interested in furthering this conversation, or if you have any questions, we encourage you to reach out to us through the Saskatchewan School Library Association's website, ssla.ca, or you can reach either Gaetana or myself on Twitter. Thank you.